Welcome to Hearing God's Voice, Session 5. This is the last session of our course, and we're going to be looking at two more ways in which God can speak to us. We'll be looking at how He can speak through angels and how He can speak through prophets or other people. I'm going to give you some starter questions to begin with, and then we're going to dive straight in with looking at angels. There are many accounts in the Bible of angels or angelic beings or creatures, and they vary in their degree of description of them. So we hear about things called cherubim and we learn that they've got wings. And then we look at in Ezekiel chapter 1, it describes these things that are like living creatures, and they have the most bizarre description of their appearance with multiple faces of different creatures and wheels with eyes on them. And then we read other accounts where we're not told anything about the physical appearance of the angel, but we're told that when they greet someone, that person is terrified, they're frightened to be in the presence of this angel, but we're not given any more details. And then I'm just going to read to you from Hebrews chapter 13. It says, "Keep on loving each other as brothers. Do not forget to entertain strangers, for by so doing, some people have entertained angels without knowing it." So then that suggests that actually sometimes angels just look like us, they look like humans. And we can miss that. We can be unaware that we're in the presence of an angel. I'm not going to teach on angels today, but what I am going to share with you, which I think is important when it comes to the subject of hearing from God, is that the word angel is translated to mean messenger. So these angels or angelic beings, whatever they are, no matter what they look like, these angels are messengers from God. They're a way that God communicates to us. It's how we can hear his voice through angels. So with this in mind, with angels being God's messengers, have a look at the Bible passages and the questions to follow. Sometimes God chooses to communicate with us through other people. In the Old Testament, we see there are people called prophets who had a very specific role. They were God's mouthpiece, and God would speak directly to them, and then they would pass on God's words to other people. We also see prophets mentioned in the New Testament as well. And I'm not going to get into a debate whether we still have prophets today. I'm also not going to get into a debate about what the prophetic gift means. What does it mean to be prophetic? Whatever you want to call it, whether you want to call people prophets or say they've got a prophetic gift, or whether you just want to say God uses anyone and everyone, no matter what, the fact is that he still uses people to speak his words to other people. I'm going to give you an example of this where I've experienced it in my own life. So I had a man who was praying for me, and he said that God had given him a vision as he was praying. And it was a vision of the footprints in the sand poem, which you may or may not be familiar with. But he was saying that God was saying through this, there's going to be a time where I'm feeling like I've been abandoned by God, but he hasn't left me, he's going to be carrying me. The next day, I was teaching my youth group about how to hear the voice of God. And one of the youths there was praying for me. And she said, "Naomi, I feel like God's given me this picture for you of the footprints in the sand. And he's saying that you're going to feel like he's abandoned you, but he's not. He's going to be carrying you." So I had 2 consecutive days of the same message from God through other people. What had happened a few months earlier to this was God had spoken to me as well. Whilst I was at the piano, I was just playing some chords, asking God to speak to me. And He spoke to me then and gave me this song, this prophetic song, about how He was going to carry me when things are tough. So I now had three times where I'd heard the same word. I then had another lady a few months later say that she saw a vision, and in the vision there was me surfing through this big stormy tidal wave, and she said the wave is like storm in life, but the surfboard that you're on is Jesus, and He's saying He's going to carry you through. So I had now got 4 messages, 3 being from other people, 1 being from God to me initially. And I was sat at my piano, I was playing this song that I was given right at the start, and God gave me some new words to add to it. He said, I will carry you over the mountains, I'll carry you over the deserts, and I'll carry you over the seas. And so I was like, is this really from you, God? I need confirmation. I was like, you've told me about the deserts, I've got the footprints in the sand pictures. You've told me about the seas because you've shown me about the tidal wave. What about mountains? And He spoke to me in that inner voice that I mentioned in session 1. And He said, go and look in the notebook where you keep all of your little notes of things that people have given you over the years. Go and get the letter in there that was from your confirmation and read that. So off I went, didn't know what was in this letter, found it, and in there was, I will carry you like a shepherd carries his lamb over the hills and over the mountains. And I knew it was God. So I'd had all of those words, I'd had God speak to me personally, but I'd also had from 3 other people, God speaking through them, the same message, I will carry you. Then we skip forward a few years, and as I'm drifting off to sleep, God speaks to me. Go and put on that necklace. I'd made a necklace to remind me of this word. And I'd wore it initially when God had given me that song and those people had prayed for me. But then it had gone away in a cupboard somewhere. So I got out of bed, put the necklace on. And then in the months and then year and a bit to follow, I went through that time of God carrying me. It was the most horrendous time in my life. I was suffering with depression, with grief. I felt angry towards God, and I felt like He had abandoned me. But I had this word from Him from years earlier where I knew that He was carrying me. And it was such a precious word that got me through that season. Because even though I felt like He wasn't there and I was going through the biggest storm in my life, I knew that He was carrying me. Despite how I felt, He was carrying me. So that's just an example of a way where God can speak through other people. I'm going to give you some more Bible and questions to have a look at. So spend some time just going through those and discussing how God can speak through other people. The practical tip for this session is really just some tools that might help you if you ever find yourself really stuck and really struggling trying to hear the voice of God. Sometimes we can sit there and we can be so focused on trying to hear from God that it feels like we're trying to force it, and it feels like He's getting more and more silent and we're getting more and more frustrated. So if you find yourself in this position, here are just some ways that you might like to experiment with and just try and just see if they help you hear God's voice a little more clearly. So to begin with, we've got music. You might like to try putting on some music in the background as you're praying, maybe some instrumental music so then the words aren't distracting to you. Or you might like to try music with words, put on some worship music, so then the words will lead you to who you're actually praying to. Sometimes that can be helpful. Someone shared with me just recently that they find when they come to do their Bible study and they're just really not in that place, they start to worship first. And getting into that space of worship and praise then puts them in a place where they're ready to receive from God, and they're ready to hear from Him and be in His Word. So maybe you want to try just starting with some praise and worship before you even begin to try and listen. If you're musical yourself, you might want to grab your own instrument and just have a go playing some chords, playing some songs, and just asking God to speak to you as you're doing that. Just a short story for you to do with this one. I was trying to do a painting for our living room, and I wanted it to be this profound picture that would speak about Jesus up there on our wall. But I was stuck for days with this blank canvas, just not knowing what on earth to paint. And I was asking God, tell me, what can I paint? And I was just getting nothing. He was just silent. And then after a few days, I went on the piano, I sat down, started to just play some random chords and started speaking to God. I was saying, God, what should I paint? And then there was the voice, like that inner voice I spoke about in session 1. Paint a picture of my love. And I was like, well, that's great, but what does your love look like? And he said, it looks like many colours swirling in and out as one. It looks like mighty waters with more power than a storm. It looks like rushing wind, and yet it's gentle and it's calm. But most of all, oh, most of all, my love for you is strong. And those words came out in a song, and I knew instantly what I was going to paint. I was going to paint this big wave that was all made up of all these different colours, and I was going to have a bit of like sun and calm sea in there. And I just knew, and I finally had heard God. And that was because I'd gone and I'd started playing the music, that I then could suddenly hear Him a lot easier than when I was sat there really trying to force myself to hear Him. You might like to grab a pen and paper, or get your phone or laptop, or just something to write down with. Sometimes when you start writing, then God's voice flows through the pen or through your fingers and thumbs. Whether you want to start by typing out or writing out your prayer to Him, or whether you just want to start writing the little bits that maybe you think are coming to mind, and then you might find that it just flows and He gives you the next sentence and the next sentence and the next. You might like to try movement. Maybe you like to dance. You could try dancing, and as you're dancing, speak to God through that. Maybe you want to try moving with exercise. Go for a walk, go for a run, do some exercise. Talk to God as you're doing that, and see if you can hear Him speaking to you that way. Some people find that actually just mundane tasks are where they connect with God. It might be that you're just doing the ironing, and that's a space where you hear from God more than if you're just sat there really trying to force yourself to hear from Him. Sometimes it can also be helpful to just shift your environment. Many people have found that the bathroom is a great place to hear from God. So go and have a bath, go and have a shower, and just spend some time with Jesus there. Maybe there's a special place in your house that you want to go and set aside as your special place where you meet with Him. Or maybe there's somewhere outside of your house, somewhere that you love, somewhere where you feel connected with Him, somewhere where you feel safe. Maybe trying and just spending time praying in that place might help. I'm sure there are many more ways that you could try. Think about, how has God made me? Has He made you creative? Then try something creative. Has He made you sporty? Then try and do something sporty. Just try and think, like, how has God made me? And how might I be able to connect with Him? And just experiment with it. Have a bit of fun with it. You might not hear from God that way, but you might. It's worth a try. So the tip really is to just have a go, mixing it up, do something a little bit different, and see if you can hear from God through a different way than just sitting there trying to hear from him. Another way we can discern whether it's God speaking to us is through repetition. You might find that the same Bible verse just keeps coming back and back and back. You might find that this thing that you feel like God has said to you just is repeated, maybe in different ways. Maybe you hear it in the sermon, maybe it's then on the radio, maybe then you read it, maybe then someone says something about it to you. But it's that repetition where you just keep hearing the same message. Maybe just through multiple people saying the same thing, it's that repetition that can sometimes confirm that it is God who's speaking. However, we've got to be careful with this discernment and with the other discernments that I've mentioned. I think it's helpful to use them together and to make sure that you're asking God for his Holy Spirit to reveal whether it is him or not. I'm just going to read to you from 1 Kings chapter 22, starting at verse 19. Micaiah continued, "Therefore hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne with all the host of heaven standing around him on his right and on his left. And the Lord said, who will entice Ahab into attacking Ramoth Gilead and going to his death there? One suggested this and another that. Finally, a spirit came forward, stood before the Lord, and said, I will entice him. By what means? The Lord asked. I will go out and be a lying spirit in the mouths of all his prophets, he said. You will succeed in enticing him, said the Lord. Go and do it. So now the Lord has put a lying spirit in the mouths of all these prophets of yours. The Lord has decreed disaster for you. So in this account, we hear there were actually like 400 prophets who were all prophesying. They were all saying the same thing. They were telling the king that he was going to be victorious. And then we have one prophet who was speaking the truth. He was speaking God's true words, saying that he was not going to have victory. So in that instance, the repetition discernment wouldn't really have worked. So this is why it's important to not just use them as a standalone tool, but to have that godly wisdom and look at other ways to discern if you're unsure whether it is or not God speaking to you. But often repetition is a good way to confirm that it is actually God who's speaking. Let's pretend that you feel like you've been given a word from God for someone else. Then what do you do? Let's say that you're not 100% sure if this is from God or not. You've done discernment, you're still not quite sure. You think it might be, but there's that level of doubt still there. How do you then deal with that? My advice to you would be to just be honest. There's no point in you saying to someone, this is what God says, if you're not certain it is God. Because if you present it that way and it's not God, it can do an awful lot of damage. So be really honest. You might like to say something like, hey, I feel like I've got this word from God for you, but to be honest with you, I really don't know whether it is from God or not. So could I share it with you, and could you discern for yourself whether you think it is? Could you pray about it as to whether it's from God? And if you feel like it's not, that's fine, just ignore it. But if you feel like it is, then that's wonderful. That's why I want to share it, because it could be him and I don't want to miss that opportunity. So just be really honest and say something like that. You might find different responses as well to how people receive the words. Someone once shared with me an analogy of a postman, where you delivering a word is like the role of a postman with a bill. So he goes with this bill, he delivers it to someone. It's not his responsibility um, to make sure that they pay the bill, and it's nothing on him as to how they react to receiving the bill either. So as someone delivering a word, remember that's your role. You're just the messenger. You're just the one passing on the word. What do you do if you are confident that it is God? Well, then, if you're 100% sure, then you can say it with confidence. You can say, look, I believe that this is what God has said to me for you. But again, make sure that you're sure before you do that. Another key bit of advice for sharing words is to do it through love. And I mean genuine love, not just, hey, I'm saying this out of love to you. Like genuine love. Try and see that person through God's eyes. See the person how God sees them. And that might come across in the tone in which you share it. It might come across in the setting or the situation in which you share it. A lot of damage has been done where people have shared words from God, but they've not shared them from a place of love. As an example, maybe someone has given a word to someone else, but it's been quite a personal or a private word, but they've done it in the presence of other people. And that could be very, very hurtful for the person receiving that if it's very private. So again, common sense, wisdom, but have that love as you give words. See the person as God sees and ask God for advice on how to share it if you're not sure. How do you receive words? Maybe someone has come up to you, given you a word. Maybe they've said, this is what God says. Maybe they haven't done the whole, I'm not sure if this is God. Maybe they've just come up and said, this is what God says. What do you then do with that? My advice for that would be to hold onto it loosely. Sometimes if we're given a word, we want to grip onto it and say, this is what God has said to me, and I'm going to make it happen. And you almost force things to happen. If it's God, if it's truly God who's spoken about something that will happen, then it will happen. Hold on to it loosely, but also use the discernment as well. The discernment that we use about when we receive words, use that discernment as well for yourself. Someone's given me this word from God. Have I got that sense of peace about it? Does it match up with what Scripture says? Is it what I know to be true of God's character? How other people confirm this? Go through those things and pray about it, discern for yourself, rather than just taking it as this is the definite truth. So hopefully that helps a little bit in giving words and receiving words. It can be a really brave thing to do, to share words. Often you may find God asks you to do something, to share something that is way out of your comfort zone. And it really does take a level of trust and of courage to do it. But I can assure you that the fruit that you will see, if it is a true word from God, and if you get the privilege of seeing that, will outweigh the fear and the thumping heart that you may feel when you deliver it. So there's an element of trust and an element of faith there, but it's definitely worth it. We've reached the end of our course on hearing God's voice. I really hope that it's been helpful for you, and I hope that you've been able to identify areas in your life where God has already spoken. And I hope that it's giving you the tools and the confidence to go forward and to recognise God's voice in your own life. It's been an absolute pleasure for me to teach this. And I really do hope that as you go forward with these new tools and as you walk with Jesus, that you would just grow closer to him each day as you listen to his voice.